welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Lana, and on this channel, we do deep dives into a single book. And so in today's video, In today's video, we'll be reviewing and discussing Abigail by Hungarian author Magda Szabó. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't have any Hungarian. I apologize. But this is a book that I've had sitting on my shelf since 2020. And since then, I've seen it pop up on YouTube a couple of times. I've seen it pop up on Instagram a couple of times. This is one of those books, I'm going to go ahead and say it, is underread. It's a little bit under the radar. This book is, though not my favorite, I didn't give it a 5-star. I did give it a high rating. So I'll just go ahead and say it. I gave it a 4.25. This book is just, there's something special about it. And we're going to go ahead on and dive in. Life, for all its horrors, was wonderful. And of course, of all those wonders, the most precious was youth. So in Abigail, our main character is Gina, who is a wealthy Hungarian teenager whose father sends her to a rural boarding school during World War II. And this is taking place in Hungary. Her father doesn't initially tell her why she's sending her away, though it is later revealed in pieces and layers that it is for her own safety. Her father, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, he is high ranking in the military. And so he actually understands the intricacies of what is actually occurring in the war. We're going to talk about propaganda a little bit in the book later, because the author does talk about this. Gina has a difficult time adapting to the strict religious boarding school, especially since she's been indulged her whole life. Gina is rich and spoiled, but in a way that's endearing. She doesn't get along with her peers initially. She sasses the t-shirt. Gina is sassy, okay? Gina wears her sassy pants for the whole book, and I'm here for it. And she pulls pranks on them. Okay, this book is subtly funny. However, Gina does begin to mature, and as the war continues, and we have hindsight here because we know how World War II ends up. During the space and time in which this book is taking place, as the war is turning blatantly toward an Allied victory, Gina's life becomes endangered. And that's a massive spoiler, so I won't be getting into that. This is, of course, as I try to keep all of my reviews spoiler free. So, for those who love a good boarding school story and the atmosphere of a cold, strict school with very colorful characters, think Hogwarts-esque, think Jane Eyre-esque for the time that she spends at Lowood School. This atmosphere that's in this book is right up your alley. The back of the book, there's a blurb that says it's reminiscent of Harry Potter and Jane Austen. I disagree. I think it's Jane Eyre in Hogwarts, so Harry Potter. Again, the time that you spend with cold halls and atmospheric schools, and to the point where it's almost a little claustrophobic. Yes, this is this book. Very reminiscent. Gina and her classmates spend most of this novel getting up to various shenanigans. There's drama between the girls. There's drama between the students and the teachers. There's drama between the teachers. Gina does not initially adjust well and has a difficult time making friends because Gina's mouth is reckless, okay? She does not always think before she speaks. But in her defense, it's because Gina is completely out of her element and resorts to defensiveness and in arrogance as a way to cope with so much change occurring around her at once. Gina ultimately is extremely lonely. She misses her father. Her mother has long since passed away, so she's very, very close with her father. She misses her father terribly, and she just wants someone to understand how out of sorts she really feels, and she really wants somebody to comfort her, but she lives in an environment, and in the boarding school in particular, where this type of comfort and outward display of empathy is prohibited. So the teachers actually are not allowed to comfort the students in the way that Gina wants to be comforted. What sort of person can you be, she wondered about the deaconess, if you can't see how terrified I am? Say something, if only to show me that you feel sorry for me, or at least that you understand. Show me that, for all your strange customs, you are still a human being. Say something so that this won't be so terribly hard. She was as lonely and bereft as only an adult could be, beyond tears, enveloped in a sadness like that of old age. But don't let this idea, this theme, this concept of Gina's loneliness give you the impression that this is a melancholy story. There is a coziness to this book, and it's also subtly humorous, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. Gina does learn to temper herself, and it's actually a joy to watch her go through this process. And it doesn't happen overnight. And I find this to be extremely realistic. Gina is only 14 and then 15. Her birthday does occur. And she's acting her age. Yet this is a character that has tremendous self-awareness for somebody so young. All my life, I have been a wild thing, Gina reflected. I am impatient and impulsive, and I have never learned to love people who annoy me to try to hurt me. Now I shall try to learn these virtues, and I shall do so for the sake of my father. For him, I shall seek to be gentle and patient. So with this growth, Gina eventually is welcomed by these other girls. And these other girls have been at this boarding school for quite some time. So they've had time to adjust to this different environment where Gina is still trying to figure these things out. And so these new friendships that Gina eventually develops does assuage Gina's loneliness, though not entirely, because ultimately Gina just misses her father. And so there's not going to be a relationship to ultimately get rid of that, to make her feel 100% welcome at the school, because it's just not what Gina is not getting at the core of what Gina's loneliness is really stemming from, or rather where Gina's loneliness is really stemming from. Gina had also learned how much more special something was if you had to struggle to achieve it, and how much stronger you are if you face life as a group, sharing the same passions, the same hopes, the same waiting and worrying, and were ready to act as one to help any of your number who needed it. Abigail is a very interior novel, meaning that the majority of this book takes place within the confines of the boarding school. There are a few instances in which the students go outside of the school, but it's highly regulated. They have to walk. They are still in their uniforms. They have to walk in single file line. Everything is timed out perfectly. They have chaperones who are the other teachers. So yeah, it's almost a claustrophobic novel, in that the environment takes place in very few places outside of the school. And so regardless of this, though, the student, you know that there's a war going on, and the students and the staff, of course, know that there's a war going on, but they are cut off from many of the details. Szabó expertly weaves in nuggets about the war, reminding you that there is a war going on, but it feels vague to the reader, just like, and in a way, it feels vague to many of these characters because they are so isolated. And to be honest, like I said, that was really expertly done, because I'm reading this in the 21st century. This was published in the 70s. And so even when this book is published, by the time this book was published, the reader knows exactly how World War II ended up and how horrible and catastrophic World War II was. But so for the author to write this book in a way that World War II seems vague, talent. Even though we have hindsight, we feel as if we were in this boarding school because the war is this background character, if you will. There was scarcely one of them who did not have someone at the front. The thought of it was always there, just below the surface of their consciousness, and yet all they ever whispered about was love, their teachers, and what had happened in lessons that day. With this vague awareness of the war, Gina, because of her father and her father's status in the Hungarian military, is privy to more details than her peers and even more details than some of the teachers. And so she has a more accurate understanding of how the war is actually turning out. So if you didn't know, Hungary was actually under the Axis powers. And so they were allied with Germany and Japan and Italy. And so her peers and many of the teachers think that they're winning the war, but Gina is actually aware that it's not going so hot for their Hungarian soldiers on the front. So this is another way, actually, in a way that Gina feels lonely, because she's privy to information that is contrary to what the propaganda is saying and what the narrative is in Hungary at this time. And she's not allowed to disclose it either. Her father said, be silent for your own safety. You don't know who you can and cannot trust. And so it does pain her slightly, though, to see her peers and her teachers deceived. She really just wishes that they would have the real truth, because what they consider to be true is not true at all. It would have been so good if there had been someone at the Matula who knew what the truth was the way her father did. Someone who could keep her abreast of what was really happening. Propaganda at its finest, where you have a narrative and then you have the actual truth. But if you speak outside of that narrative, you're the one who's demonized, even though you actually know what's happening. We can all relate. I think we can all relate to some degree. So lastly, before I wrap this up, why is this book titled Abigail? Because Gina's the main character. So Abigail is a statue at the school, and the girls at the school will leave Abigail notes with their problems. And then somehow miraculously, Abigail responds back, either written with a written response, or in many cases, Abigail will somehow resolve a problem that one of the students is having. And so this has been going on for years at the school. Abigail is actually one of the staff members, and you don't know who until the very end. Only Gina. It's revealed to Gina. The other girls will still have no idea who Abigail really is. Abigail takes on this omniscient identity at the school. Abigail is a presence at the school, an actual person in the school. And so this is a person who has clearly knowledge of what's going on in these girls' life, because everybody's within the confines of the school. Abigail takes on this omniscience. And since this is a religious boarding school, I couldn't help but connect a metaphor here between Abigail and God. So Abigail, almost to me, tended to represent this metaphor of the omniscience and omnipresence of God. And this is the quote that did it in a note that Abigail wrote. "Stay where you are and try not to worry. I shall take care of you. Keep calm until you hear from me again." Is that not a very biblical thing to say? If you actually go through the Bible, many times God will say, be still and know that I am God. I will take care of you. If I take care of the sparrows and the sparrows, I'm going to take care of you. Do not worry. Many times in the Bible, I forgot how many times it says, do not worry. Because, when you don't have control of circumstances, what are you going to do? You're going to worry. And so Abigail kind of has that presence in this book, which makes sense because it is a religious school. I'm going to wrap it up. I found Abigail to be a delightful, cozy novel. It's well written and well structured. There are times where we get these flashbacks or flash forwards to Gina reflecting on her youth as an adult. And it's just a really well-structured novel. And again, it's cozy, but also thought-provoking. It's not flippant or vapid in any way. You will become, as a reader, become entirely engrossed in the drama of these characters. And there are some moments that happen with these characters, these students, especially in the drama between Gina and these other girls, that is just, will have you giggling. It's just teenage girl angst and teenage girl bickering at its finest. But again, it's not vapid and it's not petty. And then once you understand why Gina's father once it's revealed rather, why Gina's father tucks her away in this boarding school, there is a suspenseful element to this novel. Because yes, Gina's life is in danger. But again, the emphasis is focused on youth and the innocence of youth and how innocence can actually be maintained regardless of what's going on outside and the craziness of what's happening in the world. This novel was a joy to read, and I'm really looking forward to Magda Szabó's other novels. The Door in particular has been compared to Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet, which I will be beginning this summer, in May in particular, not quite summer, but where I live, May is hot. And so I will be reading The Door next year. Even though The Door is one novel that is under 300 pages, I read a review in the New York Times that there's something about the themes and the style of The Door that is highly comparable to Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet. I rated this book, as I said in the beginning, 4.25 out of 5. My sister read this book, and my sister is I'm a picky reader. If you know me, I do not give out 5s every now and then. My sister is really, really picky when it comes to fiction. She is actually more of a non-fiction memoir type reader. She read this book and gave it a 5 out of 5. My sister's very, very close friend is more of a rom-com reader. She loves romance. She read this book, which is outside of the genre that she typically reads, and she gave it a 4 out of 5. So I think that is a testament to how, regardless of what you prefer when it comes to your genres, or if you prefer fiction or nonfiction, Abigail is one of those novels that's just going to be a crowd pleaser. Again, I think it's underread. I think it's underreviewed. Pick it up. It is a joy to read. I think the perfect time of year to read this actually is the fall and winter, because it's taking place in Hungary, which gets pretty cold there. And so the majority of this book, it's cold. I think that is the perfect time of year to read this. Are you familiar with Abigail? Is it a book that you've kind of have pinned somewhere to read maybe in the future? And if you've read it, what are your thoughts? Have you read this author's other novels? Please feel free, of course, to leave me comments down below. If you would like to, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more book shenanigans. That's also where I review books first and get those posted first before they make it over to YouTube. Also, I post my monthly TBRs, my monthly wrap-ups on Instagram. So if you want to see what I'm getting up to in advance in the book world, please feel free to follow me there. I am going to wrap it up. As always, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.